Hello everyone, and welcome back to AP Bio with AP Playground. Today we're covering topic 4.4, feedback. Today our focus is on positive and negative feedback, and especially how they contribute to the maintaining of homeostasis. And we'll be looking at different kinds of negative feedback loops and positive feedback mechanisms. And our suggested skill is argumentation 6E, predict the causes or effects of a change in or disruption to one or more components in a biological system. So let's begin with homeostasis and negative feedback. And homeostasis is the tendency to resist change in order to maintain a steady and stable environment. So essentially, if there is going to be a change in the environment around it, organisms are going to try to keep their environment, their own environment, their internal environment at a set point that everything is kind of going to return to when there's deviation from this environment, it either being too high or too low. And this happens through negative feedback loops, which counteract changes of values from their set point. So negative feedback is going to oppose the stimulus. If there's a change from the set point that goes too high or too low, the negative feedback loop is going to oppose the stimulus to bring it back to the set point. And most systems have two negative loops for that too high or that too low. And this can affect behavior. So one of the most common examples is going to be the body temperature. And we have a normal body temperature of about 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, and this is going to be our set point. Now, if the body temperature rises above normal, there is going to be a negative feedback loop that gets it back to normal. And the brain is going to signal blood vessels to dilate and sweat glands to secrete. So you're going to start sweating to remove water and heat, and the blood vessels are going to dilate, increasing the surface area, so you're not going to, the heat won't be as contained in one point, and body heat is lost to its surroundings because that surface area has increased, you've started to sweat, and the body temperature is going to drop back toward normal. Now, conversely, if the body temperature drops below normal, then the blood vessels are going to constrict so that the heat can be preserved. It's not going to be lost to its surroundings. Sweat glands are going to be inactive, and if it drops even lower, then we're going to start involuntarily contraction of the muscles, i.e. shivering. And so body heat becomes conserved, the muscle activity generates body heat because you're moving around, and the body temperature rises toward normal. And of course, this can also affect behaviors that are not involuntary, such as when you're cold, you can also feel hungry often because when you eat, that means your body is starting to work and it's burning fuel and it's producing heat for itself through metabolic processes. Now, enzymes also use feedback inhibition, and feedback inhibition is when the last product of a production chain is essentially going to inhibit another part of this chain in order to stop production. And this is sort of a molecular level negative feedback loop because we're opposing the stimulus of there being some product being produced from being changed in the enzyme. Now, another very common example on the AP exam is going to be the control of blood sugar and insulin versus glucagon. So insulin is going to cause blood sugar to be taken up. So when your blood sugar is too high, insulin does its job and removes blood sugar from the bloodstream, and the cells take it up, and then glucose is converted to glycogen for storing in the liver. Conversely, when it's too low, blood sugar is too low, glycogen is going to be released and changed into glucose to increase blood sugar. So these are both negative feedback loops, even though one causes an increase in blood sugar and the other one removes blood sugar, because they're both counteracting the stimulus that there is too little or too high blood sugar, and we're trying to get back to our set point. And this is where diabetes comes from. If you don't have enough production of insulin, or the body doesn't react to insulin, then there's not going to be blood sugar taken up, so cells aren't getting fuel, and because of this blood sugar, there's also going to be an increased urination and thirst because it's changing the osmotic pressure. and the water potential. So over here, you see when there's high blood sugar, there's a promotion of insulin released by the pancreas, and that's going to stimulate glucose uptake from the blood. And when there's low blood sugar, then that's going to promote the release of glucagon, and that's going to stimulate the glycogen breakdown to raise the blood sugar. So again, all of negative feedback is just going back to our set point and opposing the stimulus. To end off, let's talk about positive feedback. It's kind of the opposite of negative feedback. Instead of opposing the stimulus, we're looping to amplify the signal and moving away from the set point, not back to the set point. And two very common examples are as follows. First of all, the onset of labor in childbirth. When the baby pushes against the cervix, it causes it to stretch, and the stretching of the cervix causes nerve impulses to be sent to the brain, and the brain stimulates the release of oxytocin. And oxytocin causes the smooth muscle lining of the uterus to contract. And essentially, when this happens, the baby is going to continue pushing against the cervix, and it's going to continue stretching, and there's going to be more oxytocin produced. And this is going to loop essentially until the baby is born. There's being more oxytocin produced with every single loop. We're moving away from the set point. Additionally, there's the ripening of fruit using ethylene. So when an apple on the tree ripens, it produces ethylene, which signals to the neighbors that they should ripen too. And so the neighbors produce ethylene, and then more apples ripen. And as more apples ripen, they produce ethylene, which causes the neighbors to produce ethylene. And so then they ripen, and then they produce ethylene, and that causes the neighbors to ripen, and then they produce ethylene. So essentially, there's this whole cycle of of ethylene causing ripening over and over and over again, and affecting all of the neighbors in that tree. And this is, of course, another example of paracrine signaling, where we're communicating to these nearby cells to continue ripening and performing this positive feedback loop. So there you have it. That's all of feedback. Negative feedback, opposing the stimulus. Positive feedback, amplifying it. We'll see you next in the cell cycle.